Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where each week here at MMA Junkie, we take a spin through the biggest stories in MMA. And I'm your host, Gorgeous George. With me, as always, some of the sharpest minds in the biz. Goes from MMA Junkie Radio. He's going to be our leadoff batter. He's here in the fight capital of the world. And Tom, also here in Las Vegas. He's our talented fight analyst. Check out his Protect Your Neck podcast. Danny Segura, the host of Hablemos MMA. Check it out on YouTube. Para ustedes que hablan español y les gusta el combate. Cold coffee on the ones and twos. Let's get started. All right, guys. In the intro, I failed to say we're going to talk some bare knuckle, and we're actually leading off with it. So a little bit of post thrust as I'm back in the hot seat here. But we got to lead off with bare knuckle 41, bare knuckle fighting championship 41. It's properly called, sorry. Mike Perry defeated Luke Rockhold via TKO. Eddie Alvarez and Chad Mendes had a knock. Big Ben Rothwell and Josh Copeland, they threw some heavy leather. Plus a cameo from Conor McGregor, who was bouncing around all around the ring, even popped in for a face-off against Mike Perry after the main event. Panel, react, unpack, goes. You're leading things off.
Dude, I absolutely love this thing. You have to remember, I spent a lot of money on boxing a couple weeks ago. Kind of walked out of that a little disappointed because really, I just tuned in for the main event, and that was just okay. I spent about half the money here, and this was amazing from the beginning to the end. They had my attention from the press conference a couple weeks ago, and then all the antics that Luke Rockhold and Mike Perry had my attention. And then when you get to the actual fight night, boy, was it action-packed. It was nonstop. I feel like where this company has an advantage is in their prelims because the fights are so short and there's so much action. You'll sit there and you'll watch, even though you don't really know who some of these guys are. It's still entertaining, and the pacing of the event is really, really good. So sometimes with PFL, with Bellator, we have to sit around and wait for that next card to come out. That doesn't really happen here. And so when you look at some of the guys that they pull in, right, they're pulling in guys from boxing, from MMA, so we're very familiar with these guys. And then the broadcast itself, you add in a world-class mixed martial artist like Chael Sonnen, you have a world-class boxer in Austin Trout. Like, these guys really do make it feel like this is the most important thing going on in your life right now, and you have to tune in. And then the celebrities show up, and Conor McGregor, to top it all off, is there. I mean, dude, I give this event a 10. The fights were tremendous, even though the main event did kind of end a little differently, not what we were really expecting. It was still a good fight up until that moment, but Chad Mendes and Eddie Alvarez, I mean, guys, if we're talking about fight of the year and we're including a BKFC, it's got to be up there in those talks. This was just a tremendous card overall. I had a lot of fun.
Yeah, Eddie Alvarez himself said it, man. This is for dogs over here. You could tell he was even impressed having just debuted in the ring over there at Bare Knuckle. All right, Dan, Tom, what were your thoughts on BKFC 41, everything that took place? Your turn.
Man, this one seems like a big one. And again, I'm a contrarian, folks. I'm a hipster. Look at these glasses. Like, it's not going to surprise you to let you know that I've never really watched a BKFC, and that kind of still holds true. That being said, this one did seem different. It did seem big. I'm hoping the fighters are getting paid. I don't know where the money's coming from, which is a question we always have to ask. Make sure there's no homophobic dictators funding organizations. It sounds crazy, but it's a real reality in our day. That being said, I do hope the fighters are getting paid, and I hope they're safe. Again, just because it's not my taste, I'm not putting my nose in the air. I'm not judging anybody for this, but am I crazy, guys, for not jumping on board? Is it take a big event like this to maybe start getting my attention and others? We're going to have to see. It certainly overtook my timeline. But yeah, I am still guilty, guys. I'm still guilty. Maybe this one will kind of sway me toward it and others, but yeah, still guilty of not watching a BKFC.
Yeah, Dan, I was talking to Goes, and we were thinking this was a type of capturing an audience type of a show. They do the prelims for free, kind of like the teaser to get you to order it. And the action was awesome. The production, the lighting, the setting. Hey, God bless the UFC. They're the juggernaut. They're the NFL, whatever you want to call them. But that Apex, man, can sometimes be like, come on, like, fights are in my backyard or something like that. And so this event was kind of like drawing you in. And remember, the opposition isn't just combat sports sometimes. NBA, NHL, they got their playoffs going, man. Game 7s everywhere. This one was drawing people in because I could see the way social media was popping. Danny Segura, what did you think about BKFC 41?
Yeah, I mean, it was huge. I actually had a different experience than most of you guys because Saturday night I was doing my own thing, living life. So I wasn't really watching the fights. I watched them after the fact, both UFC and BKFC. But yeah, my timeline was overtaken by BKFC content. Barely really saw much UFC, and I think that just speaks volumes on how the promotion has been doing things because it's not easy to overtake the UFC as far as attention, even if the card isn't that great, because obviously this fight night card was, I would say, one of the weaker ones of the year. But props to BKFC. I'm not 100% full on hipster, full on Dan Tom, but a little bit. This product has sort of there's been some time needed for me to acclimate to this product. I've already covered, I think, like 3 BKFC events, so I've seen the fights in person, I've seen the hits in person, I've seen the damage in person. That still kind of has me a little bit hesitant, but I can't look at a guy like, for example, Luis Baum Palomino and say it's just brawling, right? Like, you can see the art in there, you can see the technique in there. So I'm not a huge fan of the product itself. I do enjoy it from time to time. I do have some questions around it, but all in all, I am more welcoming now than ever before, and I think this event helped that. I mean, you have Conor McGregor in there, who made it help kind of feel a little bit more part of the combat sports sphere, just because obviously the connection there. And dude, at the end of the day, I do like having diversity in combat sports, right? Sometimes for a long time, actually, if you were out of the UFC and you were done with the UFC, whether it was politically, contract wise, or just you weren't cut out for it, you were done. I mean, there was nothing else for you to do as far as to make money. And now BKFC is offering these big paydays to these fighters to continue fighting, to continue providing for the family. So I'm always going to be in support of that. So all in all, I do think BKFC, you got to give credit to them. They are nailing the matchmaking. I remember a few years ago, a lot of promotions would just sign whoever was a big name, no matter the losses, no matter the age, just that came from the UFC. But BKFC really picks and chooses who their guys are, and they clearly do a fantastic job at it because they are creating compelling matchups. They are taking over entire weekends in the combat sports calendar, and they're a promotion that just really been around for just a few years, really.
Yeah, and let's be honest, man. Social media is filled with timelines, skateboarders breaking their arms, surfers getting crushed by waves. So the fact that people want a little bit more blood, a few more cuts and bruises, who knows? BKFC is coming strong with the paydays. Look at that. Look at that. Luke Rockhold, it looks like his teeth got, shattered a little bit. One got broken, a split lip. That's how that fight ended, by the way. He just said no mas. That was his version. Um, in the middle of that fight with Mike Perry, but he had a great representation of himself. And I want to go back to Goes here. First of all, the comment section, bring them. I will include you guys. And here's a couple. JD Realty says, what a week in the West for BKFC. Should Luke call it a career? He seemed extremely out of place in the ring. I would slightly disagree with that, but Goes, why don't you answer JD's question?
All right. So I do kind of slightly disagree with that as well. Maybe in BKFC, I'd say call that, and in mixed martial arts, I just don't know. See, the thing with Luke Rockhold is you don't want to just put him up against anyone. He's past that, right? Whoever you're going to put in front of him has to have a reputation, has to have good credentials, and I don't know that he wants to see that again in mixed martial arts. In BKFC, it got pretty rough out there, man. Mike Perry does not back down. Maybe in some kind of like I don't want to say celebrity boxing, but maybe up against another mixed martial artist in boxing, I could see his career going on like that. But I do want to touch on something that both Dan and Danny said, and I'm with them. Early on in this product, I thought it was a little too brutal for me. But as it kind of went around, you have to remember that I think the fighters themselves are still trying to figure this thing out. Kind of like the early days of the UFC, right? If you look at the early days of the UFC, the product's not the same as what you're seeing today. It took a while for people to figure it out. Not every fight is a barn burner where guys are just throwing bombs. You look at a guy like Austin Trout, right? He's a professional boxer who came out here and he took almost no damage fighting Diego Sanchez. Like, you can win these fights with strategy at a distance. You can do that as well. So I would say give it another try, Dan. I think it might actually grow on you, but I'm with you. Early on, I had my questions. And just to wrap up on Luke Rockhold, dude, I thought he was taking it to Mike Perry there for a second. He almost knocked him down. Things weren't going his way towards the end of the fight, but I wouldn't be shocked, man. These paydays, these guys are getting paid, and that's what we're always talking about. That's what the guys are talking about in the chat, right? We want these guys to make money, and these guys are kind of at their tail end of their career, so we'll see what happens with that.
Mm-hmm. All right. Michael Joel says this weekend has been the biggest BKFC event ever. Apparently, he follows it. Craig in the chat says Luke still hasn't learned his lesson, still underestimates his opponents and lose. Okay, there's partial truth to that. Luke has this way of talking trash by, I guess, minimizing his opponents. But I don't think he's ever really meant it in a disrespectful way. I think it's just fight buildup. If you look at his social media, and I'm not trying to be his white knight here, but he was very complimentary of Perry. Sounds like it could be done with BKFC. I don't know, but he was very complimentary of Perry, paid him his respect and all. I just think Luke, he's not like the gift of gab type guy. So there's not going to be jokes and he's not going to be shooting memes on Twitter. He just talks the way he does. He's a California surfer tough guy. And but look, he can back it up. He's got 2 major belts, Strikeforce and UFC. You can't take that away from him. One last thing here, Michael Joel. BKFC is cool. At least the fighters get paid well, unlike in the UFC. Don't go too far. They are paying well. UFC is paying well. I agree with you, though. They could pay better. Keep them coming, guys. We'll probably talk some more BKFC here on some of the other stuff that's coming up here. But I do want to touch on one thing. Anybody want to say anything about Chad Mendes? Looks like this one's it. We lose another WEC guy. Where's my WEC glove? It's somewhere here. We could lose Demetrius Johnson this weekend. WEC superstars are starting to go. Any thoughts, guys? We'll go back to you first.
Well, yeah, if you look at Chad Mendes, right, like he had a fight prior to this. He had experience with BKFC, and he got a knockout. That's the thing about BKFC is we just don't know what the longevity of these fighters are. We don't know that guys are going to come in and end up with 20 fight careers, over time. I think it's going to be more kind of like what you're seeing here with Chad Mendes, a couple fights and out. Who knows? You look at Ben Rothwell, right? His first fight was over in seconds. And now he had a different experience here in the second fight, right? So I don't know what's really going to happen. But for Chad Mendes, he said all the right things. He said, I just don't need to do this anymore. And he set himself financially. He set himself up to where he doesn't have to. And if you don't have to be out there taking damage, why do it? So I applaud him. What he was able to do in the WEC, what he was able to do in the UFC, and then even spreading his wings a little bit over here in BKFC. Great career. It was always very entertaining to see him. Sad to see him go.
There's not many of them left.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Dan, remember them WEC shows here in Vegas? Crazy, huh? Great memories.
I love the gloves, man. It's been over a decade since the UFC absolved the WEC, and only now we're getting our first non-title flyweight. I know flyweight didn't exist in WEC, but you know what I mean. The UFC doesn't use the little guys at all, and I'm trying to take a shot at them while being apropos to George's shout out. But yes, use the little guys.
For sure. Sky V's and El Daddy, BKFC was fire. Boxing in the chat room says Luke is a quitter. He may have to take that one. It's a little harsh, but they were saying that it could be a broken palate. Remember when Lyoto Machida upkicked Randy? It wasn't just like a jarred tooth or a split lip. I mean, it was a broken palate, and you could tell something was there. But man, after what Luke gave us versus Paulo Costa, I don't know, man. I think I give him a pass on this one. That looks pretty gnarly. If it's just the tooth and the lip, maybe some people would say tough it out. I don't know, but there could have been some other stuff that was jarred in there. And Luke, by the way, threw some nice lefts down the pipe. I don't know. I don't think he looked horrific. I think people are just clowning on the dude a little bit too much. Dan, you wanted to chime in?
Yeah, I just want to say real quick on Chad Mendes, as a guy with psoriasis, I could really use some of that cream. It looks like he's been really hitting that cream hard. He's looking great. But honestly, about the Luke Rockhold point, that's something I want to bring up, and you guys can speak to this. You guys interview these fighters for a long time now. You've seen these fighters. You've seen that the little cuts that we see with gloves on, right? You guys know these fighters, and you see them up close when you interview them. You see how it's embedded in their face. George and Goes, especially, you guys have had such long relationships. You see what happens to these fighters, not just on the aesthetic level. So for people to sit there, we just mentioned Chad Mendes, right? We just validated Chad Mendes. Like, I don't need to take this. Now we're going to question Luke Rockhold getting his literal lip busted open. I mean, that's part of the reason why I and many have trouble watching this, because those of us who have covered, been around, competed, dedicated our lives and health to it. Yeah, even us, call us weak. Yeah, maybe we don't have a stomach for it. Regardless of your taste, I'm not judging, but don't judge these fighters. I'm not going to judge you for liking it. Don't judge these fighters for getting out there and taking their all. Let's do the math here. I think the comment on the pay is right. That is the economy we're in. Perhaps we wouldn't see this as much if the UFC did pay them better. There is a point to that comment, just like there's a point to what Chad Mendez said about not needing to take this sort of damage, even for the money that they're getting paid. So just wanted to throw that out there.
All right, Joey's getting hyped up as well. He's coming at boxing. We got chat drama. Well, we got to move on. Let's get going here. I want to talk about some other stuff here. We got an update for you regarding Nate Diaz. Soon after last week's SBC, we found out that the New Orleans Police Department issued a warrant for a battery charge, and it was for this MMA superstar. A few days later, Diaz voluntarily turned himself in. He was booked and later released the same day, all the way back to Stockton in one day. It was quick. This is according to his rep, Zach Rosenfield. Rosenfield wrote in a statement, "We continue to look forward to presenting all the evidence and videos that show Nate was acting in self-defense." Guys, have you changed your mind at all in the past week as we've learned more from the case and we've seen more footage from the brawl? Dan, you lead off.
Honestly, my position hasn't changed too much. I was over in Hawaii for Bellator, and I just saw my timeline. I thought it was fake almost, but yes, of course, we've seen more angles. We've gotten a couple statements here and there, but honestly, I don't know how much more statements or more angles can really change my opinion. What we've seen hasn't changed it at all, and my opinion is not a crazy one, guys. Obviously, we shouldn't be fighting. I was listening to Bill Burr talk about New Orleans, saying, in your 20s, it's awesome, but once you get in your 30s or your 40s, you're like, what the F am I even doing here? And I think that's what the real question is here. Nate's a dad. I'm a big Nate Diaz fan. I'm not trying to get him in trouble, but at the same time, Nate shouldn't be out there doing this. You guys don't need to hear this from someone like me. He's got his own family and stuff. I would like to see him kind of start going that route instead of, getting in street balls where things could get even worse than they are now.
Yeah, no doubt, man. Street brawls can end up in so many different directions. How about you, Danny? You and I, we had differing opinions last week. You seen any of the additional footage as the case brought any new thoughts to you as far as what you think here?
No, my opinion is still the same. And I don't think this was a clear case to be like, look, Nate Diaz is messing up here, right? Because certainly the guy is approaching him, even though he's got his hands up. Like it's, there could be a case there for self-defense, right? And also there was a brawl surrounding them. So certainly a high intensity situation for Nate Diaz. But still, my whole point was, this is not the first time. If it was the first time that it happened, you go, okay, well, it was bound to happen to Nate Diaz, right? Something like this was about to break loose at some point in his career. But he's continuously getting into these type of skirmishes, altercations, incidents, whatever you want to call it. And again, when you're in the street, just like when you're in the cage, every time you start fighting, every time you start throwing hands, you're rolling the dice. And you just wonder how many times you can roll the dice and get favorable numbers. In this case, it doesn't seem like there's going to be something too consequential for Nate Diaz, or at least that's what it seems like. Obviously, things can change, but I don't really think the guy's like claiming to be like heavily injured or trying to sue him or anything like that. And I don't think anything bad happened to the dude that he choked out. But still, this should be a wake-up call to Nate Diaz, because that could very well have been the case where he dropped him on his head and he could have killed the guy, or he could have had brain damage, or he would have been after his money and sued him. Who knows? So again, my stance is still the same. Do I feel bad for that guy that got choked out? I don't know him personally, but he does seem like a cloud chaser. He does seem like him and his group would instigate something like that to get clicks and to get on headlines. But again, Nate Diaz should know better. Nate Diaz shouldn't be in these type of situations. And, again, I love Nate Diaz. Nate Diaz has contributed so much to mixed martial arts and the combat sports world. Like, I would hate to see something bad happen to him. He's a winner in life. He's got money. He's got fame. He's got a family. Why risk it, man? Just, get some security guards around you, or just altogether stay away from those type of situations. And yeah, this should be a wake-up call for Nate Diaz, because he's got a lot to lose.
All right. Goes, how about you? Any thoughts changed in your mind since we've learned more about the case and seen some additional footage?
A little more. I mean, I have to agree with my colleagues here. It seems like trouble just seems to find Nate Diaz, and sometimes Nate seems to find trouble. In this particular case, in watching the video from a different angle, yeah, I understand, man. If somebody gets into your space a little too much, maybe you do have that reaction. His leash just isn't as long as others, but in doing that, he does run that risk, right? Of everything that Danny was talking about, all the bad things that can come to a fighter because of that. And it's dangerous. And you know what? The other guy, Fake Paul or whatever whatever you want to call that guy, Rodney something, right? He got off light too. You know, Nate could have beat the living hell out of this guy, right? He chose to choke him out and drop him. That could have been a lot worse for that guy. And it could have been a lot worse for Nate Diaz, right? You never know. Like we were just talking about our timelines, right? Earlier in the show of all the things we see, how quickly people pull out guns, knives, all kinds of stuff. All that can happen. And if you keep playing this game, it will probably eventually happen. But as far as like legally, I think Nate's going to be okay. We just saw Joe Schilling, right? He just got off. I don't even know if the guy he knocked out has woken up yet. I mean, that dude got leveled and he did way less than this other guy. So I think Nate's going to be okay in this situation, but I agree with Danny, like bodyguards or something. If you still have to go to these events and you can't stay out of trouble, then you need somebody, some kind of buffer in between you.
Yeah. You know, in the UK, there's this, well, worldwide, honestly, but I'm more familiar to the UK. Man, there's just guys that wear a tie Monday through Friday, and on weekends, they like to go have a knock, they call it. I don't know if Nate's just that guy, like where, hey, I'm not looking for it, but I wouldn't be mad if it found me. But yes, guys, he does have kids now. He's established. He's got money. And, hey, it's crazy, man, with guns and knives. Anything can happen. So I'm going to flip it around real quick. I do say Nate's from the streets. He knows the rules. Sometimes I think he doesn't because guess what? He threw the water bottle, almost ruined that event, right? His boys fighting and all that. He got away. That's where you need to be a step ahead of someone. So if you're from the streets, then be a step ahead of someone. Go out another exit, have security escort you, and just get away from those dudes that are trying to get something on you. Because I'm telling you, this is what it boils down to, guys, in my opinion. I think someone wants to slap Nate Diaz and just get it on video and be that guy. Because Nate's always slapping people. I think someone wants to get one in on him, not necessarily shank him or steal on him or whatever. I think someone just wants to give him a good rap on the beezer and claim that he was the one that got 209 back. That's just my thoughts.
Could be. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think a lot of people.
It's pretty clear. It's pretty clear. Like that dude that's a freaking Jake Paul impersonator, or sorry, Logan Paul impersonator. Like, what is he after, right? I mean, if he's impersonating someone whose entire existence is just to get clicks and to be as viral as possible, like you kind of already get a feel of that guy's brand, right? So yes, of course, this is probably like as crazy as it may sound, getting choked out, knee to the ribs, dropped on the concrete and getting the back of his head cracked and bleeding. He was probably in love with that it got caught on video, and then he can say, oh, I got into a brawl with Nate Diaz, and look, I'm on this headline, I'm on this other headline. We know those people survive on attention and clout, so he's probably just rejoicing on this, and perhaps that we're even talking about him just now. So again, I don't feel terribly bad for him because again, he's not like some innocent bystander that was just attacked by Nate Diaz. But yeah, that's just the world we live in, and Nate Diaz should be smarter and know better that there are people out there that are just looking for clout, that are just looking for clicks, that viral moment, and they're trying to do it off him.
Yeah,
I will say the guy could have just been like one of those David Carradine fellows and really into that autoerotic stuff, and Nate was just helping him out. I don't know, maybe the defense wants to go with that, but I agree.
Yeah. For those that don't know, there is additional footage if you want to go look for it, where it shows Nate kind of circling in to where you eventually found him. But it looks kind of like he's either getting away from the situation or finding a more comfort zone. I don't know. But it's the other guy, Rodney Peterson, where he's kind of a little bit more in a stock mode. That kind of did it for me in terms of like, hey, that dude ain't looking for an ussy or an autograph or nothing like that. That dude had something on his mind. I think that right there is what's going to save Nate Diaz. But we'll address the situation on MMA Junkie as the case unfolds. If there's more to report, George Masvidal's already telling him, I got a superstar celebrity lawyer, so I think Nate's got it covered. We move on. All right, guys. In MMA, we had some action too. Can you believe it? We're 24 minutes in. Now we're talking some MMA. UFC Fight Night 223 took place here in Las Vegas. And in the main event, Song Yadong defeated Ricky Simón, stopping him in the 5th round of the pivotal bantamweight matchup. That will definitely push the Chinese fighter closer to a title fight, in my opinion. Maybe not right away, but it moves them up the charts. That's 4 out of 5 for Song in the win column, and Simón's steam comes to an end after winning 5 in a row. Your take on the fight, the finish, and Song's positioning within the division. Danny, ahora tú!
He looked great. He looked great, and I believe he's just 25 years old. I was very pleased to see him being so composed, picking his shots. Also, how late his power carried in the fight, because it was a 5th round stoppage. He was comfortably winning the fight, in my opinion. Maybe there was some close rounds here and there, but I think he could have been happy to just ride that round out and go to a decision and be comfortable in getting the nod from the judges. So I do like seeing a little bit of that still alive killer instinct even late into the fight. I mean, everything looked pretty complete, looked pretty versatile. Everything looked, checked as far as like his homework for Ricky Simón. I do wonder what would happen if he would fight somebody with a higher volume. I know that he beat Chito Vera, but in a lot of people's minds, he lost to him, someone that at times can have some volume. So I do wonder how he will fare against some other styles in the division. But again, he's just 25 years old. So I do think we're just seeing a bit of a prototype. Obviously, his style is already he is who he is. But I think over time, we will see an improved version. How far will that improved version go in this division? I don't know. But whatever he's got now, it's still good to hang with the very best. So great win. And I'm looking forward to seeing how he evolves in the next couple of years and how far he's able to take this.
Goes, that bantamweight division's popping. There's a lot of talent. But recently, Adrian Yanez took an L. Marlon Vera took an L. Dominic Cruz, going back to last year, he took an L. Peter Yan, 3 in a row. He's kind of out of the picture. Where does Song Yadong fit? 2023, a little too soon, probably 2024. What do you think?
Yeah, no, definitely a little too soon. But see, that division has so many tiers, right? You could even go as far as saying it's got 3rd and 4th tier fighters. And the thing about that is, it's not no disrespect to any of these guys. Those guys can give some of the guys in the 1st tier a run for their money. That's just how deep this division is. Song Yadong, he looked like he belonged there. That was a really good performance. Strategy-wise, the preparation, the way the fight played out, you have to give his coaches, himself, the reactions that he had during the fight. He did great. I'm going to take away from it just a little bit. I feel like Ricky Simón is a lot better fighter than what he showed us on Saturday. I feel like the moment might have got to him a little bit, but by no way am I saying it's all him and not what Song Yadong did. Song Yadong had a great game plan. He was really good. But I do think Ricky Simón is the one that's going to take a little bit more of a tumble. As far as Song Yadong goes, it's a difficult situation because I don't know that a lot of fighters are lining up to fight this guy. If you fight him and you beat him, I don't know that you get the clout that you would get like if you got a victory over, say, a Peter Yan or a Sean O'Malley, someone like that, even a Marlon Vera. I don't know that you get that. If you lose to him, you take a tumble. So to see where he goes from here is going to be really, really interesting. I don't think a lot of people are going to want to line up to fight this guy. But, like Danny said, I think he's actually getting better here. And I think this dude can make some waves, just not anytime soon. There's so much, it's so heavy at the top and so many things need to play out that I don't think he's going to see anything for a while.
Maybe that's what impressed me the most about the win is Simon's a problem, man. That dude's got a motor, gas tank, and he just never really pushed the pace. Almost let Song Yadong off in that department. But I don't want to take anything away from Song Yadong. Like they mentioned in the chat, he had some killer left hooks. He was just on. It was his night. Dan, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, I like that Goes brought up that, maybe we didn't see the best Ricky Simón. He looked like he got kind of, I don't want to say scared as in like the word scared, but scared off from the power, so to speak, and that athleticism from Song. And also the game plan perhaps from his team, not the best. They were apparently instructing him to fight a back foot game. That being said, Simón did do enough of a pace, although not his normal toward pace, and did do enough wrestling to force Song to show some new folds to his game that actually really impressed me. Like Danny said, he was able to carry his power late, and that's particularly impressive, not just because he has shown the propensity to fade in past 3-round fights, but this fight was originally scheduled to be a 3-rounder until, like many lightweight fights ending up on fight night cards, by happenstance, the UFC had to put it on the main offering there. So props to both these guys for stepping up, but obviously props to Song, who really did impress me. I also agree with Danny as far as guys like, I believe he mentioned Chito Vera, a rematch with him would be tough. I also think Merab would be a tough matchup. Obviously, we've seen Sandhagen beat him, but he is young. And he does kind of have that Chinese market backing in the sense of, and I'm not saying this in a negative way or to disparage any fighters, but we're seeing fighters from Mexico, China. In other words, anywhere where a UFC is setting up a PI, you probably got a faster spot to a title shot.
Yep. And again, the youth, the power, the experience. I think he's at a great point in his career, 24? Is it 24, 25? I mean, that's amazing. He really, really has impressed.
25.
25, man. Good job, Song Yadong.
I'd love to see him and Marlon Vera go at it again. Chito Vera, I think that'd be a fun rematch for 5 rounds, because that was the whole story behind their fight, right? Like, a lot of people thought Chito might have won, but then there's maybe a case to be made that within those 3 rounds, no, Song Yadong did win. But then even then you can say, okay, if you add 2 more rounds to that, the tide was heavily shifting for Chito Vera. So maybe 5 rounds, it would have been a different story. So I think that fight's fun. Also, the everlasting rivalry between Dominic Cruz and Team Alpha Male, that's always fun to revisit. So maybe book that. I don't know. I think there's definitely a lot of interesting fights for him, but one of those 2 I think would be great.
You want to see Cruz tangle with Yadong? Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay. We move on. Speaking of changing one's mind, Israel Adesanya does want to fight Du Plessis in his next fight. The only problem is DDP, if you will, versus Robert Whittaker has already been booked for UFC 290. That's in July, International Fight Week, coming up here in a few months. If it's not that the UFC can't change this situation, folks, we know that they've taken fights apart, move things around. But what does this say that the UFC and Adesanya didn't just address this from the beginning? Seemed like a slam dunk to 99% of the fans and media that I personally follow. I'll let the guys chime in, but I want to know, fair or foul for both parties, the UFC and Izzy? Did they mess this up from the beginning? Goes.
Foul. Big time foul here, guys. I really am struggling to figure out why this makes sense for these guys. I mean, look, if you don't do this fight now, you're really running the risk that we're never going to see this fight, okay? I don't want to be put in that situation. These guys are generating heat. It's interesting. You have a guy like Israel Adesanya who's fought a lot of people in this division already, and I don't see why we have to risk this matchup for a fight that we've already seen twice. Like, I'm not saying that Robert Whittaker doesn't have a chance if they fight again. Of course he does. He's a great fighter. I just don't need to see it right now. We can see this later on. It doesn't have to happen right at this moment. So, I mean, I don't know, Shump, are there people that are clamoring for this fight? Are there a lot of people that are saying they want to see this? Because to me, this doesn't really seem like a fight that very many people want. Dana White's always talking about we give the fans the fights they want to see. Well, this ain't one of them. Like, we want to see Dricus and Israel Adesanya. I think it makes sense at this moment. And if you're Israel Adesanya and you're chasing this GOAT status, I think a fight like this kind of helps, right? I don't know that beating a guy a third time would help you as much as putting some more skins on the wall, different skill sets, mixing it up a little bit. I think that's something that would really help Israel Adesanya, even just a different look, right? I mean, he just fought Pereira, I don't know how many times. He's fought Bobby Knuckles. Like, give him something different. Give him a different challenge. I think the fight itself just kind of makes sense. I don't understand. This is a big foul for me.
Yeah, me too. Dan, how about you? Izzy and the UFC, fair or foul? Did they both blow it by letting it even get to this point where we might have to take a fight apart?
Foul, but for different reasons. If I'm Dricus Du Plessis, I got to be wondering, what am I doing wrong? You got Patty Pimblett, losing decisions and getting the win and shouting anti-immigrant stuff. You've got Sergey Pavlovich being rewarded with heavyweight spots after sharing and tagging the UFC in white power memes. You've got Colby Covington, saying the filthy Brazilian thing and seeing his career skyrocket. I could be here for days, folks, if we go on. But the point is, if you look at the way UFC traditionally markets people who like to be edgy, we will call it. Yeah, I got to be wondering what I'm doing wrong if I'm, Dricus-Du Plessis out here waving the apartheid flag and it really injecting politics that are very colonial, racist based, and just not cool, for everybody that says get politics out of sports. They get mad at us media when it's the fighters themselves, like Dricus, even before trying to get this fight with Israel Adesanya. Go rewind the tape to his UFC debut. That's where I started talking about it, when the guy was out here calling himself the real African. So even though it's foul, I'm secretly glad they're not going to make it, because we don't need any more of this racist type of talk or any kind of colonizer energy that Du Plessis, who is fine as a fighter. I'm looking forward to covering him as a fighter, but keep that stuff out of here.
Well, you just made Sal J in the chat happy. His tampon fell off earlier because we weren't getting into this. But let's do it right now, Dan. Let's have a healthy debate. I politely disagree. I just think Dricus is going towards the angle of just saying, I'm based in Africa. These other guys aren't. I want to bring a title back to African soil. The colonization part, I don't know. Izzy's talking about the word cracker. I'm not comfortable with that word either. But I really just saw Dricus looking for an angle and trying to be the Chael Sonnen to Anderson Silva, the Conor McGregor to Jose Aldo, just poking buttons to kind of get in there and build a big fight. You don't see it that way? Because I didn't see that whole colonization thing. I didn't really see color being brought too much into it. I just saw guys saying, look, I wake up, I breathe African air, I live in Africa, and when I win, I'll bring the belt back to Africa. I see an angle here is what he's working.
Again, if that was his angle, that's not an angle for Izzy. That's kind of his angle that he's personally trying to put out there. And in that post-fight interview, he actually cited political movements, including stuff with the farmers and land, which again gets a little tricky. And maybe it's because I'm a Hawaiian who, had of the American 50 states, we're the only one that had a queen put to head by gunpoint, had our language made illegal. So when I hear, the whole, he speaks so well, to the things of Song Yadong speaking English, to these apartheid and what it is, George, by face value, you are correct. But the thing called dog whistling, you can say certain things to mean another. And really, it's not even having a dog whistle. Just, let's be honest. Let's just call it for what it is. A white guy saying he's the real African. How much more cringe does it get from that? So I encourage you, George. I encourage you, listeners. This isn't, this isn't a political or history show. And I'm far be it from me to be any source. Go be your own source. Go look it up for yourself. Look up things like apartheid, the history of South Africa. And you just look at things like, again, you can look at your own parts of the world, like me looking at Hawaii, for example, and you can see kind of the parallels there. If, again, it really opens up a book of worms that I'm not even trying to go down, folks. You guys know how it is. We always get blamed because we're the media, even though it's the fighters themselves injecting these things. And Du Plessis has been injecting it, has been doubling down. And I could see, George, how many would think that. But I urge you all to just do a little bit of your own history, Googling South Africa, apartheid, and some of the movements. Go back and watch Dricus-Du Plessis' post-fight interview during the Fight Island era yourself. Let his words and go Google it. And that's it. You don't need me to color it for you. I'm just calling the sky blue because it is blue.
I will do that, my man. We debate, but we debate with decency, and we cover it all here on MMA Junkie. We ain't scared, bitches. Danny, let's get your take on all this.
Yeah, this is a weird one. I don't think it's as easy to parse. I do agree there has to be a line somewhere, right? I would have to go back to look at, the post-fight interview that Dan mentions, because I can't remember off the top of my head exactly what he said. And even his original comments, a lot of people are saying they got misconstrued and twisted and whatnot. I do have to say, though, I did see some comments from Adesanya. He's also not saying great things as well. We got to keep in mind this goes for both sides. So it does enter a weird territory, and certainly a very sensitive territory. And I get that as well. But I do think for combat sports, and this is not me trying to excuse illicit behavior. This is not me trying to excuse, racism, etc., or other things. But I do think for combat sports is a little bit different, because at the end of the day, these guys are trying to pick a fight with each other, right? And that's what Dricus is doing. He's building a fight with Israel Adesanya. And again, there's certain things I do think that do need to be kept away from the trash talk, and I think that could do without. There's been perfect examples of rivalries being nicely built up without having to go to certain parts. So again, I would have to do my homework on that, Dan. I did not know I haven't seen the post-fight interviews and haven't really dissected like every single comment that Dricus has made, but I do get it. I do get your sentiment. I do get why people might feel uncomfortable around this topic. So look, at the end of the day, the champ is talking about him. He wants to fight. I do think the UFC dropped the ball by making Robert Whittaker versus Dricus Du Plessis. And yeah, I do think for combat sports, again, as I mentioned, there needs to be a level of again, I'm not excusing the behavior, but I do think maybe the line shouldn't be as strict as for other sports that, you know, where you're literally not trying to pick a fight with somebody. It's just sport.
Yeah. Well, fair or foul, Danny. So Izzy and UFC, they dropped the ball. Because remember, Izzy could have chimed in. He said, I'm ready to go. He's blowing up Dana's phone. That's what Dana said. And the UFC, they need their pay-per-views. They haven't done the August card yet. So you would think that a champion that wants to defend, this is a slam dunk in terms of, like, you know, it's not like we're forcing DDP in. He's won 4 straight. He's pushing this heat angle, whatever you want to call it. Is it 5? Okay. Fair or foul for the UFC and Izzy, right?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like there is in the space already, and I've seen it not only in media but in fans. There is a little bit of rematch fatigue. I mean, we just saw Adesanya and Pereira go back at it. Even for great fights that are somewhat controversial, right? You look at Volkanovski and Islam Makhachev. A lot of people just didn't even want to see a rematch just because, even though the fight was great, there's a storyline, the GOAT, this and that, whatever the case may be. People just don't want to see a rematch just because people just want to see new matchups, new looks. And I do think that there is a rematch fatigue in the industry. So when you get a chance not to do a rematch, you should take it. Obviously, in some cases, you can't escape it. Like if Valentina Shevchenko loses her belt, first loss in her flyweight career, I mean, you got to run that back, right? But for this case, and let's keep it 100. I feel like sometimes when you do, and you know, people get mad because everybody wants to put you in a position where you have to say everyone's the best, and then the next weekend, no, that person's the best, and then the next weekend you have to say they're the best. Robert Whittaker should win this pretty comfortably against Dricus Du Plessis. He is the far better fighter. Let's just keep it in mind. Could something happen? Yes, 4-ounce gloves. He's got power. You know, people get old, et cetera, et cetera. But he should win this comfortably. So that just sets you up to a trilogy fight, being already 0-2 against the champion, Israel Adesanya. So I just think that you're setting yourself up to be in a terrible position. Now, Dricus could go out there and knock out Robert Whittaker. Sure, that's not impossible. And then the fight would be even bigger. But the odds of that happening are very slim. So you got a guy here that's got beef with the champion. Whether you like it or not, it is real. They do not like each other. It is a selling point for a fight. And you know, you can't really knock his record. He is unbeaten in the UFC, 5-0. He's got finishes. He's got some nice veteran names. So it's not like he is in the top 10. I believe he's number 6, just right outside of the top 5. So it's not like merit-wise it would be insane to put him in a championship fight. We've seen fighters do way less and compete for a title. Heck, we're going to see that pretty soon with Leon Edwards and Colby Covington. So, yeah, the UFC dropped the ball big time here.
Yeah, I think they both did. I think they both get a foul on this one. Izzy's just a little late to the party. He's reacting to something he should have reacted originally. But the UFC is more of a foul for the year. I think they blew it with not putting in Bilal versus Edwards to begin with. Whether they were going to do it in July, and I think Edwards said he may have done it. I don't know. Guy's got an 8-fight win streak, for crying out loud. And then they say, we're not going to Mexico. In 2023, what Mexico, you know, I'm sure they have more than one arena. Get there, man. You got 3 champions. They said in 2023, we're not going to get there. We're blowing it. Don't blow it. These guys have been able to find arenas from one, you know, I think they took a Vegas show to LA or something back and forth. They went from Tachi Palace to Jacksonville quickly. They can do it. Get to Mexico. So you're blowing it there. You're blowing it with DDP. UFC, get your act together. I said it last week. I'll say it again. We got to push you guys as fans and media. There's some layups out there for you guys. All right, we're going to move on, though. As much heat as the UFC event took in terms of their card strength, UFC 288 is a solid card. That's this weekend. It's not the deepest pay-per-view fight card ever, but it's one hell of a main event. Aljamain Sterling defends his bantamweight title versus Henry Cejudo at the top of the bill. Both, in my humble opinion, are chasing Dominic Cruz as the greatest bantamweight and or the greatest bantamweight champion ever. This fight is so close, the odds makers have it tight. According to Caesars Sportsbook, our partners here at USA Today Sports and MMA Junkie, Triple C is a slight favorite at minus 115. The champ comes back at minus 105. Basically a coin flip. Who has more to gain and more to lose? Dan, we come back to you.
What do you mean chasing Dominic Cruz's legacy, George? Are you saying that Dominic Cruz, just because he's old and lost 2 of his last 3, is not a legend? Of course. Thank you, George, by the way, for mentioning that. People always conflate what's going on now with what a legacy actually is, and Dominic Cruz is, has that kind of GOAT status at bantamweight. You can't deny that, but you also can't deny that Sterling or Cejudo won't be right there with a strong argument for it on their resume with a win. So as far as gains, man, I mean, really both have a ton to gain, but who has more to lose? I guess, yeah, you're right. That kind of is the question here, right? And that's obviously, we're getting lost in a speculation city at that point. But honestly, I think it's a bit of Cejudo, even though you could say, well, he already retired and what's going to happen? He never lost either of his titles. Well, that's fine. But the fact is he doesn't have either of his titles. And the fact is he hasn't made flyweight in 4 years. I don't think he's ever going to make that weight again. We'll see how well he makes bantamweight. I think he'll make that limit okay. But he still has to beat a tough guy in Aljamain Sterling, right? So I think the stacks are kind of against him. Whereas Sterling, I think win, lose, or draw, he is going for fun fights, moving up to 45. But if you talk to Sterling, I bet you he's got the Max Holloway answer, where he probably wants a belt if he wants to move up. So maybe he looks at it as he has more to lose. And I don't blame the fighters for looking at it that way. In this stage of the game, with the way the UFC negotiates, you need every bit of negotiating power, whether it's a belt or otherwise, on your side. But yeah, I still think Cejudo has a little more to lose here.
All right. How about you, Danny? You see it the same way? And what do you think about this whole picture of greatest bantamweight champion ever? Are you looking at it through those lenses as well?
I think Dominic Cruz is still the greatest bantamweight to ever exist. And I think he'll keep that for a while. I don't think a win here for either guy, whether it's Aljamain or Henry Cejudo, will vastly change the conversation, at least in my eyes. And I do agree with Dan. There's certainly a part of the fan base that doesn't really understand what sort of legacy is and GOAT talk. I remember not that long ago, I said that Fedor Emelianenko had a greater resume and a greater career than Stipe Miocic. And a lot of people were like, are you kidding me? Stipe would knock him out in the first round. I mean, he just got knocked out by Ryan Bader. I'm like, that's irrelevant. We're talking about what he did, not who he is currently, right? But anyways, I can go on a rant about that. But yeah, I don't think even if an impressive win here, say like a pretty dominant performance and then a finish, I don't think it's enough to pass Dominic Cruz just yet, but it does put them at a good spot to do just that if they so continue fighting at 135 pounds. I would say that the person that has more to lose here is Henry Cejudo. I think if Aljamain Sterling were to lose, there could be that weight cut card so easily available. And look, I think it'd be a valid one. Like, if you look at the guy, he's huge. I've talked to Eric Nixick a year ago, and he's like, yeah, he's bound to go to 145 pounds. But for whatever reason, he just keeps lingering at 135. I do think he can just go, hey, I'm going to go up to 145, pack a little bit more muscle, compete there. And, he does seem to be younger, a little fresher than Cejudo, so he could probably still have just a bigger gap of time to, keep adding to his legacy. Cejudo is entering this fight at what, like 35, 36? He's 36, actually. So his time is very limited. So if he wants to add to his legacy, every single fight counts, because I don't really think he gets 5 fights in this comeback. I think he gets maybe 2 or 3 on top of this one, and that's already kind of pushing it. So he does have a win of Dominic Cruz, so that always helps in the case of surpassing him as far as the greatest bantamweight of all time. So I think, look, if he beats Sterling here, he gets a few defenses, we might start talking about him being the greatest bantamweight. I don't know, but certainly gets close to it. So I do think there's more on the line for Cejudo here. Also, we haven't seen him in a long time, right? 3-year layoff, something like that. Yeah, I think a lot on the line is for Triple C right now.
Yeah, man. Even he's teasing 145 at some point too. He wants to be C4. Sterling with the weight stuff like you addressed, Danny. Man, this is so many subplots regarding this fight. All right, Goes, how about you? Who's got more to gain, more to lose? Cejudo and Sterling headlining UFC 288.
I feel like Aljamain Sterling has more to lose here, guys, and it's simply because if he loses, I don't think this is one of the most liked guys on the roster. I think his way back to a title shot in whatever division you want will probably be longer than it is for other fighters. And I think that's going to make life very difficult for Aljamain Sterling. If Henry Cejudo loses here, well, he can fall back on the fact that he still is one of not just the greatest mixed martial artists that ever lived, but the greatest combat sports athlete. And if that's what's going to happen when I lose a fight, I fall back on that. You did pretty damn good. The guy hasn't been around for a while. I get that. But it's not like we've been sitting here going, well, what's he been doing? He's not hiking Kilimanjaro or something like that. He's in the gym a lot. He's breaking down footage. He's coaching fighters. He's got Demetrius Johnson with him, right? One of the other guys that we talk about on this Mount Rushmore that's pushing him. So if there's anybody with that mentality that it takes to be an Olympic athlete, if there's anybody that we can trust coming off of a layoff that will be prepared, I think it's him. Now, yeah, if he wants to continue making money, this will probably hurt Henry Cejudo a little bit. But as far as legacy goes, man, that guy's already done so much in combat sports that I don't think he has as much to lose as an Aljamain Sterling. I think Aljamain Sterling, you remember, like, even if he wins, right? What are people going to say? Well, Henry Cejudo, he's coming off a big layoff. I mean, Aljo just can't really win. Like, he can't catch a break. And that sucks for him. So I think it's important for him to keep going. And quietly, he is defending this title, man. And this is a really quality fighter. I think this is a great main event. I can't wait to see it.
And I can't either. I think both just have a lot to gain and a lot to lose. Both chasing different types of things. Cejudo really wants to be a historical figure up there with the gods of Jones and GSP and Habib. I think he chases that type of greatness. Sterling, he wants to pick up some bags. I think he wants to be multi-divisional champion as well. Maybe get to that point. Who knows? But great main event. And Goz and I will be hosting a watch along on Saturday. Check it out here on MMA Junkie. We'll watch the fights along with you. If you don't order the event, we'll tell you what's happening in real time. We got time for a couple additionals, so let's get to it. Goz, it's like you read my mind. I'm passing me that baton. Demetrius Johnson came out of your mouth. Guess what? He faces Adriano Moraes this weekend at One Fight Night 10 in Colorado. This is a trilogy. They both finished each other. Both, obviously, we got the champion Johnson versus the former champion. So both have held belts, major belts. Demetrius' resume. Thoughts on this trilogy matchup? And if Johnson's last fight, what will a win or loss do to his already impressive legacy? Let's go to Dan on this one. What are your thoughts on this one, Dan?
As far as the legacy for who? I'm sorry about that. I was catching up on the chat.
Demetrius Johnson?
For Demetrius Johnson. Oh, yeah. Well, I'm big on DJ legacy as far as that goes. And I'm glad, by the way, shout out to Danny. He probably, me and him probably go on the same rant for these things. But I don't think DJ gets enough respect. Say what you will. You can have your thoughts about one and Shatri and all that stuff. But I don't think DJ gets enough respect in that kind of conversation we were having earlier in regards to it. And I'm glad you brought him up, George, because it's kind of apropos, in my opinion, because I feel like you almost can't talk about, Cejudo's without talking about DJ. And those of us who know the history and the tie-ins of these divisions knows that some of these fighters are kind of linked together like that. And yeah, I mean, I'm sorry if it's a kind of a jumbled answer there, but I just don't feel like DJ gets the respect he deserves in regards to those conversations.
Danny, he's tied with Jones with 11 title defenses, but he's also got a Grand Prix win, and he also would add a 12th title defenses, albeit a different belt. Jones also has added another weight class belt. So these guys have been like a 1, 2, 3. Do you think DJ makes a move on GSP and Jones if he's successful on Saturday?
All I got to say is Demetrius Johnson is the shit. I mean, that's just a simple way to put it. I do think that I am somewhat biased, and I think everyone is. I do think the part of promotion does clog everybody's mind. I think if Demetrius Johnson would have been better promoted, and I do think he also has some blame in that. I don't know if he'll ever admit it, but I do think maybe looking back, I feel like he could have done more as well to further his brand. But obviously the UFC has a big fault there. But I think if he would have been properly promoted, this conversation that we're having would be way more normal among GSP, John Jones, and Demetrius Johnson. But I feel like we're going to have this conversation. I'm not looking at the chat right now, but I'm sure people in the comments and on the chat will heavily disagree that we're just even bringing him up. But he should be in this discussion. Like, Demetrious Johnson has done historic stuff. I mean, till this day, he has the record for the most title defenses in the UFC. That's not an easy thing to do. We see in all divisions how quickly the belt can swap hands. So just longevity itself, it speaks volumes about how good Demetrious Johnson actually is. So I do think he's an all-time great. And man, this is such a tough conversation to have. I had George St. Pierre for the longest time as the number one, but John Joe's moving up to heavyweight, getting a belt there. I know he didn't beat Ngannou, but still, he did so impressively. It certainly made the waters a lot murkier. I think my only thing with Demetrious is that he never moved up a division to conquer a new title, and I do think that hurts him a little bit, despite having the longevity. So I don't know, man. This is a tough thing to say. So I'll give no opinion besides just saying Demetrious Johnson is the shit. That's it.
He did start off as a bantamweight, and he had a pretty decent record. He just came up short against Dominic Cruz, so he didn't win a title. But he did compete for a little while when there wasn't a flyweight division. Sky V's and El Daddy in the chat says, "I'm flying into Denver for one championship this week. Let's go. You're going to have a good time, man. They have a really, really good card. Look out for Stamp Fairtex versus Elise Anderson. RDR, he's a really, really talented grappler. One of their champions over there at one. Roberto Soldic, he's making a debut coming over from KSW. So you're going to a fun card this weekend. Goes, let me toss an additional at you. What do you like of Mike Perry's run at BKFC? He's not fighting jabronis, as you know. Julian Lane, I mean, this guy throws some knuckles. He's a good bare knuckle fighter. Maybe he didn't do as well in MMA, but MVP and now Luke Rockhold. And now the face-off versus the notorious Conor McGregor is slowly he becoming BKFC's star or face of the company, albeit he says, I'm out of contract right now.
That could be a big problem for BKFC. But if you're in that negotiation table, you have to kind of look at the situation, right? Mike Perry, yeah, he could very well be the face of that organization, depending on how you look at it, right? He's got that look. He fights the way you would imagine somebody looking like that would fight. He gets right in your face. He's a decent fighter. But I don't think after having this kind of success and really having fun, like it seems like Mike Perry's having fun. I don't know that he'd want to go back to the training it takes to be a world champion in mixed martial arts. The only other avenue he could possibly have is boxing, but I don't know that he has the technique and the speed for something like this. He just seems like he was bred for something like BKFC. So I really do hope if he is truly a free agent that they do come to terms with each other because they're just the perfect fit, man. And, his run so far has been pretty damn impressive and there's still guys for him to fight.
Good stuff. I hope they re-sign him. He's made for this. I got one from the chat that I saved. Who wants to address it? You can raise their hand. Penty in the chat. He's saying Colby deserves the title shot. What are you talking about? Less merit. So we're going back a couple of topics here. Anybody want to take that one on against Penty?
George, that's called trolling. We don't even need to address it. I mean, there's no case to be made. Zero.
Well, even Dana White said he's the greatest number two, but that was while Kamaru Usman was at the top, and he did weigh in London. I'm just being facetious here, Danny, but not even that doesn't do it.
Covington hasn't even fought in a year. This weekend, Gilbert Burns will get his third fight in just 2023.
Hey, Danny, would you say
don't even get me started about Bilal Muhammad.
Who do you think is the toughest matchup though out of those three guys?
For Leon?
Yeah.
I do think it's Durinho. I think that's the guy to beat right now outside of the champion. I think Durinho has the wrestling. Go look at the Steven Wonderboy Thompson fight. He's got hands. He's got more power than both Bilal and Colby Covington. He's got better submissions than both Bilal and Colby Covington. Both Bilal and Colby probably do have better wrestling than him, but not by a country mile, not by a lot. I do think Gilbert is right there in a wrestling match. I think that they would probably be fairly even. So I just think all around, Durinho is the most dangerous guy in the division right now at 170.
There you go, Penty. Go chill out and have a coffee. Make it a venti. And I'll take the last one. Sal and Tarzan were saying, Nate dropped him on his head. Give me a break. Did we not already cover this? Some guy was stalking him, trying to get one on him. If anything, he hooked him up. He just choked him and put him down. Were they waltzing? Did you expect him to dip him? Is he a newborn? Was he going to kiss him on the way down and lay him down comfortably?
Put a pillow.
He just kind of said, here you go. He didn't soccer kick him. He didn't go Jimmy Conway from Goodfellas on him or anything like that. He walked away and just tried to de-escalate, and that was that. You guys are soft in the chat, man.
Although I will say, speaking of Goodfellas, I did a Goodfellas edit of the Strikeforce Nashville brawl. You know, I even used the Donovan song and everything. But it's funny if you go back and look at that, like Nate Diaz actually is doing he's doing the kick stomps. It's funny, he shoots the best double leg you will ever see. He never does one in his fight, but he does like a perfect, like a wrestler doing a knee sliding a double leg just to get to the other side of the brawl and to get a better angle to get some cheap shots in. Like it's classic. It's beautiful, Nate Diaz.
Sometimes these things happen in MMA, according to Gus Johnson. Folks, that's it for this week. You can catch us every Monday, noon Eastern, 9 a.m. Pacific. It's called the Spinning Back Clique. We've been doing it for 3 years, and now it's live. And look at these fantastic panelists that we have to address your comments, your questions, and all the big topics in the sport. Catch Danny's Hablemos MMA, Dan's Protect Your Neck podcast, and Goes and I on Junkie Radio. And don't forget to watch along this Saturday, 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific on Junkie. We will be watching the fights together. Go out and be a champion. We'll talk to you soon.